Yeah, like you weren't disappointing when you were a newborn. So I feel we should all go a little easy on the Nintendo 3DS. Back when this launched in March of 2011 here in North America, yikes, things were miserable. Or at least I was told. I remember this launch lineup and system launch in general being labeled as one of the most just deflating things of all time. But I got in on the 3DS a couple months later when the price was slashed. So that should tell you how bad the launch lineup was if they had to slash the price in August of that year. Basically, it felt like Nintendo just assumed that everybody was going to eat up the 3DS because, oh my god, it's the sequel to the Nintendo DS. Oh my god, it's in 3D. Oh my god, I got nothing better to be excited about over my life. So they launched it when they did, and they launched it at the price they did. $250 for this? And it was very obviously not ready. The Nintendo eShop on the system wasn't available. That came later in a system update in June. So the only thing you could really do with your 3DS was fiddle around with what was already on the system and play the huge lineup of launch games. Yeah, so there wasn't anything to do with the system. So, as somebody who didn't experience the 3DS directly at launch, only a couple months later, I wanted to see exactly what the launch of the system was like as a Nintendo 3DS early adopter. So I picked up all of the launch titles for the North American launch here. Yikes. Don't be fooled, there is variety. But that's all this lineup is. This is one of the most deflating lineups of all time, but I not only bought all the games, I played them all, so I kind of want to go through each one and see, hey, maybe there might be some diamonds in the rough. So let's talk about the Ubisoft games first. Man, Ubisoft would do damn near anything back then. And not only damn near anything, damn near everything. So this is one of their 3DS launch titles, Asphalt 3D. Emphasis on ass, emphasis on fault. So I actually picked this game up around the time that I got my 3DS system because this was one of the cheapest titles you could buy. I remember, I had limited funds when I picked my 3DS up in August of that year, and I think a couple weeks later, all I did was I bought like an eShop card when I bought the system, so a couple weeks later I had the chance to pick up a couple of retail games. So I remember I got Pilot Wings, and then I had like $20 left over, and pretty much all the other 3DS games were a little over that, but not Asphalt 3D. I wonder why. The Asphalt series is a mobile game series. It's like one of those incredibly generic Need for Speed-like games where it's like, oh my god, it's cars, and you got a nitro feature. That's pretty much all there is to these games. And Asphalt 3D is pretty much a 3DS version of one of the mobile games, either, Asphalt 4, 5, 6, and what, am I a fucking moron for not knowing which one? And back when I first got this game, I was around 14 or so when I first got the 3DS, and I didn't mind this game. This wasn't a go-to for me. It was kind of just if I was bored and kind of felt like a racing game and I wanted to play around with my 3DS. So I'd try out Asphalt 3D. And it was fine for what it is, but playing now through like a modern lens, I mean, like, the frame rate is god-awful. It's just a boring game. There's not much to it. I wouldn't say it's like horrible, but it's most certainly not good. I think its primary function during the 3DS launch was exactly why I bought it. It was like you go into a store, you see a car game, and you're like, yeah, sure, I'll buy that. But that wasn't it for Ubisoft, because we got 3 other titles by them. Christ. Combat of Giants Dinosaurs 3D. It's a really basic, you move forward, you get into fights with other dinosaurs. Go, fight, evade, fight, counter. I already kind of forget about playing this game. It's just so goddamn generic. It's just, yeah, it's a dinosaur game. You fight against dinosaurs with other dinosaurs. You can power your dinosaur up with all kinds of dinosaur attributes. I can't really dig into this game too much because I guess for what it is, it does its job. It's not like actively horrible at anything it does. I'm not the target demographic for this. I'm not a young child who is just awestruck by dinosaurs. I'm an older child who has other interests. Rayman 3D. So this was a bit of an interesting release, mainly because, oh, Rayman 3D. Oh, this is Rayman in 3D. Yes, it's also a 10-year-old game. This is just Rayman 2. on the 3DS. Nothing more. And it is a very cheap job converting that title to the 3DS. It works, it runs, it works fine on the 3DS, but you can tell this is like a really just like, oh, we want to get a Rayman title on the 3DS at launch, so let's just port Rayman 2. Who cares? It runs fine, it looks fine, it just feels very cheap. It feels like a real rush job. There's no real benefit to playing this game. The 3D effect isn't very great. And on the back, I guess this is supposed to represent how, like, oh man, look, Rayman's popping out of the 3DS. That's not even the 3D screen! And they have no mention on this box art that this is an old game. This is pretty much trying to play this off as like, oh man, Rayman is in a 3D world! Check it out! And it's just like, yeah, this is Rayman 2 again. Which they also did on the DS with Rayman DS. I don't like their stupid-ass marketing tactic with these games. Where just call it Rayman 2. Stop trying to play these off as brand new games. Oh man, Rayman 3D? No, this is Rayman 2. Rayman DS? No, motherfucker, it's Rayman 2. Which, to be fair, Rayman 2's had multiple releases throughout the years on different platforms. And Rayman DS, I believe, is more akin to the PlayStation 1 version, while Rayman 3D is more like the Dreamcast version of Rayman 2. So it's kind of cool that you can play these two different versions on the 3DS because, you know, the 3DS is backwards compatible with the DS. And, you know, I think that's kind of interesting. But it doesn't matter how interesting it is. The fact that this is the best game so far on the launch lineup, man, I am fucking miserable. Rayman 2 is a great game. This is a fine way to play it, but it just, it feels like a very cheap release, much like all of Ubisoft's other games here. Because that's the best way I can describe Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Shadow Wars. So yeah, Ubisoft was actually putting out Tom Clancy games on the 3DS. Actually, a little bit after launch, you got Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell 3D, which, similar to Rayman 3D, that wasn't like its own game. That was a remake of Chaos Theory. So seems like Ubisoft has a little bit of a problem going on there. But Ghost Recon Shadow Wars is a top-down tactical strategy game. It's very similar to something like Fire Emblem or Advance Wars. It's just not nearly as good. And once again, much like Ubisoft's other games, this just has like a very cheap feel to it. These don't really feel like they left the DS era. These all kind of feel like really cheap kind of DS games that you'd get for like 20 bucks. They just look a little nicer now. They just run at a higher resolution. But overall, I feel like Ubisoft's output on the 3DS was definitely more focused on quantity rather than quality. I wouldn't say any of their releases are necessarily like really bad. They're just painfully underwhelming. It feels like they started work on these like 6 months before the 3DS launched. Kind of like Bust-A-Move Universe. What the f***? Just what the f*** is this? This is like one of the most bare bones releases I've ever played on the 3DS. Bust-A-Move is a puzzle series starring the little bubble bobble critters, and it's pretty much just a match the color game. You know, you get colored orbs and they shoot them up to other colored orbs and you try to match them up to clear them. And that's it. And that's all you do in this game. There's really like only like 2 modes in it. And one of them is like, oh, just a single player campaign, which is just a string of levels. There's nothing else to it. And please, for the love of God, take me seriously when I say that. I'm using the term single player campaign because like there is a gun to my head right now. And I think the only other mode in this game is like a challenge mode, which is basically the same thing as a single player campaign, but just like served up a little differently. What this is pretty much just a way to play Bust-A-Move in a very bare bones form on the 3DS. It does have a 3D effect, and it's fine. So I guess that all my arguments are invalid. Good job, Bust-A-Move Universe. But here's to an even better job to Electronic Arts. These are their 2 3DS launch titles, and by proxy, they're only 2 3DS games ever, which isn't fair. They did a couple of FIFA titles after that, you know. Good job. But this is pretty much all they did right here, just 2 titles at launch. The Sims 3 and Madden NFL Football. Yeah, just like a completely separate version of Madden. Not a year, not anything like that. It's just Madden NFL Football. Now, why did they do that? Because it's a very just cut down version of Madden. There's not much to it. It's not as bare bones as like a Bust-A-Move Universe, but it's getting close there for people who actually give a damn about Madden games. There's not much to it, and what there isn't that high quality. It doesn't run the greatest, it doesn't work the greatest. It's not the best Madden could be on the 3DS. The 3D effect just isn't impressive in this game, and it just kind of feels like they just farted out a Madden for the 3DS, and they knew it wasn't that great, so they just called it Madden NFL Football. Or they just assumed, like, hey, we're not going to support the 3DS with Madden releases, so we're just going to call this its own thing. So that way, it just keeps selling throughout the 3DS's entire life. No. However, I would say the opposite for The Sims 3. This isn't actually that bad of a version of Sims 3. I think it controls fairly well, so you pretty much control it via the touchscreen, and you have this full-on top-down view on the bottom screen, and on the top screen you see more of like the kind of like a third-person cinematic view of the action. You can move the camera around, but you tell your sim where to go with the bottom touchscreen. It is a slimmed-down version of The Sims 3. It's not the full package you'd get on like Xbox 360, PS3, Wii, or even, dear God, the PC. But it's not really meant to be. This is mainly for the kid who wants to play The Sims 3, but all they have is a 3DS. And I remember wanting to play The Sims 3 back in the day, but hey, like, I didn't want to pay the full price for it, so I just bought like the mobile phone version, and that did the job for a bit. You don't really care about the intricacies of whether or not this version of The Sims 3 has everything it possibly could. You just want to play The Sims 3 when you're a kid, so I think this version did its job. There's damn near no reason to play it these days, but for a launch title, just to have The Sims 3 on the 3DS, I think it did a decent enough job at doing that. And of course, right after I just said that, I looked up a review of The Sims 3 3DS, my lord. But either way, I didn't have that bad of a time with it. Much like Super Monkey Ball 3D. When I originally played it a couple years ago, when I recently replayed it, holy f***. So I never thought this game was that bad, at least back in the day when I first played it. I was like, this is just a pretty quality monkey ball experience. But then I replayed it, and my lord, everybody, this is one of the most brain-dead monkey ball games of all time. It works, it functions well, but the level designs are just nothing. I didn't die once when I originally played this. And when I recently played it again, I think I only died like 2 times, and that was just because like I was zoning out. I just didn't care anymore. It's so boring. And like, hey, I understand Sega maybe wanting to make Monkey Ball a little more accessible because it's always been just this incredibly hard game series. So they probably wanted to see if they can make it just a little easier because, you know, these characters are super marketable and they appeal to kids. But it's just like the difficulty of Monkey Ball is what made it Monkey Ball. And you can make it a little easier, that's fine. But 3D goes way too far. There's always a bunch of guardrails or just like a slot for the ball to just stay in. So you just move forward. You have to actively try to fall off the ledge. And it just makes this, albeit like a quality experience, in terms of presentation, controls, all of that. It makes it an incredibly mind-numbing one. And you can get through the whole slew of single-player levels in like an hour and a half. Like, first time going through, hour and a half, 2 hours, you're done with the whole game. However, there are mini games. You have Monkey Kart and Monkey Fight. They are, dog shit. It's pretty much, Mario Kart clone and Smash Brothers clone. They ain't Mario Kart and Smash Brothers. I guess at the launch of the 3DS system, if you just wanted, like, goddamn something to do that was kind of like those two franchises, no, I'm not even gonna say that. I don't think they're worthy substitutes. I'm just always kind of like, why would you play that? Why would you do it? They're not worth your time. The core Monkey Ball mode is still like, the star of the show, and even that's very disappointing. However, like, I'll still say, like, this is definitely one of the more quality 3DS launch titles, and it's definitely a quality overall game from, like, a programming perspective, from an art style perspective, controls, all of that. But Monkey Ball kind of lives and dies by the level design, much like many other games. And this one just doesn't do it. It's not great. It's not a great time. If you look at it as a game overall, it's okay. There is content there. It's not like a completely just rush job, but man, is it nothing. But hey, let's bring things up a bit. Let's talk about some of the higher quality 3DS launch titles. Ridge Racer 3D. Remember when every console had to launch with a Ridge Racer game? Yeah, the 3DS got one, and it's good. It's pretty much just a much better quality Asphalt 3D, which Asphalt was always just kind of trying to be like a low quality version of Ridge Racer, so, you know, that makes sense. There's not much I can really say about this one, but it's just a quality arcade racer. Graphically, it looks good, it controls good, sounds good, all of that. I feel like it's kind of hard to get super passionate about this Ridge Racer in particular. However, for what it is, I think it does the job pretty well. It gives you a solid little arcade racing experience on the 3DS at launch that we all up as kids. Oh man, this was like the big one at launch. Super Street Fighter 4 3D edition. Like, my god, this is a full-fledged Street Fighter 4 experience on the 3DS, which is incredible. Keep in mind, Street Fighter 4 was an Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 game. The fact they were able to get the 3DS version running as well as it does, and looking as good as it does, playing as great as it does, like, it's a miracle this happened at launch. I felt like Capcom was able to do some wizard-ass shit with the 3DS. You know, they put out Resident Evil Revelations on the platform, and like, that game looks unreal on the handheld. And same goes for Super Street Fighter 4. It's really unfortunate because Capcom didn't really do like a ton with the 3DS that wasn't Monster Hunter related after like that initial first year or so. I would have loved to see more stuff like Street Fighter 4 where it's so impressive. Like, all the modes are there, all the characters are there. It looks good. They have an exclusive like camera angle where it's like kind of behind the shoulder, so then you get more of a 3D effect. The funniest little thing that they had to do to get the game running well is like, in the backgrounds on stages, characters are just like, they don't move. I don't know, I think it's more so funny than like a deal breaker. But yeah, this was definitely at the top of the list when it came to 3DS launch titles. It's not for everybody because it's you know, it's Street Fighter. You know, you have to be into fighting games to get a lot out of this. But I think anybody can look at this and just appreciate just the effort that went into getting this game to work as well as it does on the handheld at launch, no less. I don't fucking know. PES 2011 3D by Konami. Yeah, so it's you know, it's Pro Evolution Soccer on the 3DS. I guess it works fine. This is at least far more fully featured than Madden NFL Football, so I'll give it that. And it did get this little holographic outer sleeve. It's not really a sleeve, it's more so like this came like with that little sticky tack thing on the front cover. So, you know, would make anybody want to buy this. Hey, this was still in the era that like sports games came to literally every single console. Now, like, you're lucky if the PS4 still gets them. But while sports games pretty much still just go to PS4, Xbox One, and, you know, Xbox Series X, S, and PS5, Lego games, those still go to everything, you know, thank God. Lego Star Wars 3, this is just like, it works, it does the job, but this does feel more similar to like a DS Lego game than a home console one, which, you know, it's fair. The DS Lego games were pretty high quality for what they were. They were all, you know, 3D, and, you know, they gave you a pretty decent experience for being just a really watered down version of a home console game. I don't know, I was kind of hoping that with the jump to 3DS, Lego Star Wars 3 would be a little higher quality than it ended up being. It's fine, it's just, it feels like just, you know, a watered down handheld version of a home console game. And, you know, I just personally feel like the 3DS is more than powerful enough to give you like, you know, more of a home console-like experience. Because in the end, this just kind of feels like one of the DS Lego games, but with higher quality 3D models and better 3D control. And I guess that's fine. If you were a kid and you wanted to play Lego Star Wars 3 on your 3DS, I don't think this is like, oh my god, how dare they do this? It's just kind of like, yeah, whatever. But to round out the third-party 3DS lineup, we have Samurai Warriors Chronicles, or Chronicles Samurai Warriors. It's Samurai Warriors Chronicles. Why does it look like that? This is a Warriors game. That's it. I just don't really give a damn about these games if they aren't like a fun little crossover game like what Hyrule Warriors started. And especially not on the 3DS, because At least now, you know, like playing something like Hyrule Warriors or Fire Emblem Warriors, Persona 5 Strikers, any of those, like the control and the gameplay is very fast-paced, it's very fluid. Yes, it still gets very repetitive after long play sessions, but it's at least fun enough to kind of keep you coming back. Samurai Warriors Chronicles on the 3DS is pretty slow, and it's pretty boring and barren. It's not as deep as future Warriors titles, and it just kind of makes me feel, you know, it's one of those games you play on the 3DS, you're just, why am I playing this? Now, at launch, I feel like this does a decent enough job to just give you something to do. Compared to the other 3DS titles, this has like a pretty decent amount of content, and you know, it gives you kind of like an easy little like, hey, I'm on the bus, I'm on the train, whatever, I'll pop open the 3DS and play a level in this. You know, hey, it does that. It does that pretty well. It's just the gameplay itself is not super interesting. However, I would say this is probably one of the better 3DS launch titles. That's really fucking sad. However, we got to the main event here. Nintendo's lineup on the 3DS. Man, what is this? Oh man, oh yeah. Sad. Man, what the hell were they thinking with this lineup? Well, let's go over all this because none of these games are bad, but it's pretty easy to see why the 3DS was not lighting the sales charts on fire for a couple months, because this is pretty much it. Not only was this launch lineup all you got at the launch of the system, but that's pretty much all that was on the system for a couple months. I think Nintendo's big release was Nintendogs plus Cats. They released 3 different versions of this. This is the Toy Poodle edition. And yeah, so, you know, I grew up with Nintendogs on the DS. That was such a fun part of my childhood. Playing it again today, I still get a lot of those warm fuzzies experiencing that game. But yeah, that game is not meant for long play sessions. It is really meant for, you play it for 30 minutes, train your dog, you know, maybe throw them into a competition, win some cash, and buy another dog or something. It's a pretty basic gameplay loop. Playing it these days, I do really wish there was more you could do with your dog. You know, you could maybe run like a doggy daycare or something, and you may not own some of those dogs, but you can play with other dogs that way, and you can get money that way, and you can do all kinds of things, whatever. I'm just rambling off things. I just kind of wish there was a little more to do other than pet your doggy for 30 minutes every day. And Nintendogs plus Cats is pretty much exactly that, but just a little upgraded. Visually, it looks great. It definitely got a huge upgrade in that department, but that feels like it's kind of about it. They didn't really do much of the gameplay. It is very much just Nintendogs again, with a couple little additions here and there. You know, Cats. Nintendogs did super well, but I feel like the audience for Nintendogs didn't upgrade to the 3DS. The 3DS was kind of designed to be marketed as like this powerhouse 3D visuals. Oh man, this is like the next level. But everybody who owned a DS with Nintendogs, I think they were pretty content just continuing playing Nintendogs on their DS, or they got bored of Nintendogs and just moved on to something else. So when Nintendogs plus Cats is like your main launch title for the 3DS, and all it really is just Nintendogs with better graphics, like, yeah, it's not going to sell nearly as well, and it's not going to really sell 3DSs. And that's just the problem with it at the end of the day. I don't really think they do enough new with Nintendogs plus Cats. However, I do appreciate it as like, hey, this is an upgraded Nintendogs, and for what it is, it does that job pretty well. I just wish they introduced more features. I wish there was more stuff to do with your dog, because after the first 20-30 minutes of playing it, I was kind of like, all right, I just don't really have much else to do right now here. But this, not a bad time, pretty decent Nintendogs upgrade, but isn't really much more than that. It's just kind of like a Nintendogs with better graphics. That's where Steel Diver comes in. That ain't just Nintendogs with better graphics. It's a submarine simulation game. Why did nobody care? This game had an interesting history. It was originally like a DS tech demo back at like E3 2004, and never came out for the DS, but with the 3DS, they finally felt like, hey, we can make this its own full game. But like, Full? This is another example of like very minimal content in a 3DS launch title. There's very few levels. It's very much kind of like a, go through the levels and try to get a high score in each of the levels when you get through all the levels. That's pretty much all this game is. The concept and design is definitely pretty cool here, and it seems really complicated, but it's really not. It's pretty much like you have to control a submarine and just weasel your way through kind of a tight level. You have a bunch of abilities and you can go fast or slower, and you can ascend and descend and shoot missiles and all of that. However, since you are a submarine, all of these things are a little delayed. So that's where the strategy comes in. That's where you have to get really good. From like a game design perspective, I think, it's a really smart idea for a game. Maybe not a full game, because I feel like for a full game, you need kind of a little more to it. I feel like this is a good side mode or like an extra level in a platforming game, like I don't know, like a Donkey Kong game. I don't know why they'd have a submarine level in a Donkey Kong game, but like whatever. I don't think this is enough to stand on its own as a full game. While I appreciate the design, by God, it's boring. It's something where like when I fail in this game, everything's so slow, justifiably so. I mean, it's a damn submarine, but everything's so slow that like I don't want to retry after that. I'm just down to just be like, I'm done. I don't want to play this again for a little bit. I do like this in concept. This feels like classic Nintendo kind of taking an idea nobody else would want to turn into a full game, and they're like, yeah, f it, submarines. I feel like the core design is enough to like, warrant this being something. I don't think it's there enough to be like a full $40 game, which is what this was. Like, this is the full level lineup. Like what the heck? Why was this $40? Not bad, but not exciting. Not enough content. And I just feel like it shouldn't have been a full game. But man, the final 3DS launch title we have to discuss here. Man, I am conflicted on this. Pilot Wings Resort. This title's a lot of different things, but mainly it's kind of like a crossover. Pilot Wings and Wii Sports Resort. And like just the entire concept of this game is just a little strange because of that. So Pilot Wings games are kind of like the unsung hero of Nintendo launches. Pilot Wings on Super Nintendo launched with the Super Nintendo. Pilot Wings 64 was the one of the only 2 launch titles on Nintendo 64, and Pilot Wings Resort was here at the launch of 3DS. And what this is basically the island flyover mode in Wii Sports Resort on the 3DS. So in Wii Sports Resort, that was like one of the modes I kept coming back to. It was so fun. You would control a plane and you would just go all over the island, just discovering all the landmarks. And even if you weren't discovering the landmarks, it was just so peaceful to just fly around and just experience this nice tropical resort. I loved it. But something I didn't really like about it was how limited it was. You can only do it for like 2 minutes at a time. And after you find all the little locations, it's just pretty much at the end of the day, I just kind of like doing it because it was like, oh man, fun little plane. Brrr. So Pilot Wings Resort could really expand upon that. You're flying in the exact same location as Wii Sports Resort, Woohoo Island, and you have all different kinds of flying vehicles now. You have like a jetpack, a hang glider. Like, this was genuinely really exciting for me because I love the Island Flyover game, and this just felt like it was going to expand upon it infinitely and also give me that experience on the go. And it did that, but that's all it kind of really did. It just kind of gave me Island Flyover with a couple extra little things to do in it on the go. And that was kind of it. Pilot Wings Resort feels like it shouldn't be as lacking in content as it is because so much of its content is already pretty much recycled from Wii Sports Resort. So for it to have like just pretty much like, hey, complete these missions or just just fly around, just have a good time, and that's pretty much all there is to it, it just feels like that's a little unacceptable when this entire game is pretty much just like it's pretty much the damn thing from Wii Sports Resort. Just because you label it as Pilot Wings doesn't make it its own thing. Like, stop lying to yourself. This is just the same damn mode from Wii Sports Resort. And yeah, they have extra things to do. They have extra vehicles, all of that. But it feels like they just don't have enough. Like, I think it would have been cool if they gave you another island to explore, or like a story mode or something like that. I don't know. So while this really appealed to me based on like the general pitch of like, hey, let's take that mode from Sports Resort and turn it into its own game, like, I was like, oh boy, but that's all they kind of did. Yeah, there's more things here, but for how much this is pretty much just a recycled concept, and recycled mode, recycled gameplay, recycled assets all over the damn place with this game. For how much of that it is, I just feel like this should have significantly more content to it. Because at the end of the day, you have a couple dozen missions, and that's kind of it. You can pretty much just blast through this entire game in just 3 to 4 hours. It doesn't really do enough to feel like a full game for like the Wii Sports Resort side of things. And it's not really enough to be Pilot Wings. Like, yeah, I feel like the Miis are fine in Pilot Wings, but Pilot Wings, it kind of had its own little characters and own style to it, and it just kind of feels like it just kind of uses the Pilot Wings name on a Wii Sports Resort game, and that's it. They just don't really have anything else that's Pilot Wings about it, other than the fact that, yeah, you know, you're using planes and hang gliders and rocket jets. However, this game is still fun, relaxing, a good time. I just kind of have a problem with it, you know, like, it's just like, it shouldn't be that lacking in content. And in the end, that's kind of my problem with the 3DS launch lineup as a whole. There was a decent amount of games, but pretty much none of the games had like a substantial enough amount of content to really call them like anything more than just a fun little time waster on the 3DS at launch. Even the best games like Street Fighter 4, Pilot Wings, like, I just feel like there still just wasn't enough to them to really keep players coming back after the first like week or so after the 3DS launch. There really wasn't enough like high quality single player games or even high quality multiplayer games outside of Street Fighter. And even then, Street Fighter is still kind of like, yeah, I mean, you gotta like fighting games. The 3 games by Nintendo, I mean, they were good quality games, but there just wasn't enough to them. And when looking at all of that, it is incredibly easy to see why the 3DS really struggled in those first couple months. There just wasn't enough high quality stuff to play. However, we know how this story went. After a couple months, Nintendo really pulled out the big guns with Super Mario 3D Land and Mario Kart 7, Ocarina of Time in June of 2011. You got Star Fox 64 3D, Kid Icarus Uprising, Capcom brought out Resident Evil Revelations, Square Enix brought out Kingdom Hearts 3D. The games all started coming and started firing at all cylinders. So that should be shown that, like, regardless of how piss poor your launch is, things can definitely turn around. And thank Christ it did.